Welcome to the Peel This Banana podcast. Today we have a special treat for your ear holes. We're sitting down with Adrian of Sleeping Giants Fitness. He's a premier no bullshit fitness coach who was born a morbidly obese white man suffering from unrequited love with a second cousin in Virginia, but through sheer willpower and an open mind became a ripped, well-endowed Hispanic fitness phenom who has helped thousands of individuals and one depressed gorilla at a zoo in El Paso with an addiction to Milano cookies not only lose weight and gain strength, but develop permanent and lasting habit and mindset shifts towards living a healthy and fulfilling lifestyle. Welcome, Adrian. Thank you for being on Peel This Banana, and it's a pleasure to have you on.
Oh man, I don't think anything's ever going to be able to top that intro. That was awesome, man. But thanks for that. And yeah, I'm glad to be here. Glad to be able to chat it up with you.
Thank you. And so I know that was a whole lot of words spewed there. Basically, Adrian is just a high-level fitness coach. He's a high-level person in general, and I'm excited to have him on. And we'll just start off from the very basics. Why don't you just kind of introduce yourself and tell everyone kind of how you got started in fitness and why Sleeping Giants, just kind of, the rundown of that story.
Yeah, man. So wow, yeah, like I said, I don't think anything I say to follow up what you just did is gonna be as cool. But yeah, so I'll kind of just try my best. I mean, so yeah, I'm Adrian Hernandez. So I'm a owner and lead fitness coach for Sleeping Giants Fitness. And basically we have everything's based off online. Everything's run off my app, which provides custom nutrition and workouts and accountability. And through that medium, I help people basically transform their bodies and ideally and sometimes their entire lives, right? So and yeah, I mean, how I kind of got into it was from a very young age, I always kind of did the yo-yo thing. And when I was kind of born and up until not when I was born, obviously, but when I was younger, when I was born, I was actually a fat baby, and I came
Yeah.
out with jet black hair. But usually until, for the most part, until I was about 7, I was pretty scrawny, man, like super, super thin. And ended up moving to California from Texas. And then when I came back, I ended up staying with my grandmother for a while, and I got like super fat. So grandma's cooking just straight up
Yeah.
fatted me up. And then kind of did the same thing. I ended up losing a little bit more of that weight later as I started to kind of grow and things like that. And then come like middle school, gained a lot of weight back again. And it was always kind of like that. Like I had several times in my life where I was kind of just like going back and forth like that. So long story short, right about 8 years ago, I was at my absolute worst. So I'm only 5'7" on a good day. I weighed over 200 pounds at that point, which was a lot of weight for my frame. And I was super unhealthy. I had high blood pressure. I was dealing with depression, with anxiety. At the time, I was hooked on booze. I was just in a bad place, like overall, like super not happy, and knew that I absolutely needed to do something, or I was going to end up, probably dead, to be honest with you. So, in the course of a year or so, I ended up losing the majority of the weight. But in that process, it was literally like I took a nuclear bomb and set it off on my life and said, I'm going to do everything possible to get myself out of this hole. And that involved doing something that was super hard for me, and maybe to still is to some extent. I was getting help, and I got a lot of help. Worked with trainers, psychologists, shrinks, went to meetings, did all sorts of things, and basically got myself out of that place and,
What
transform
was
my
the
body.
impetus, if you don't mind me interrupting? Like, what was there a specific moment that occurred personally where you're like, no more, like this is all gotta like shift?
So I think there was a few, man. But I remember at one point, every time somebody asked me that question, I always remember I was in Cali at the time, and I remember sitting at my chair and I was watching something. I don't know what was going on, man, but I was like pretty drunk, and all of a sudden it hit me at that point that I had a problem like with alcohol. it just really hit home at that point and said, crap, like I've dug this hole too deep. And it was the first time I really realized like what the hell am I going to do? You know? And that was one of the moments that kind of just spurred everything as far as like, okay, this is an issue. And then, yeah, then several other times, just remember looking in the mirror and like not being happy with what I was seeing, you know, realizing that I didn't like the way my body looked, you know, trying to go and get groceries and being winded by the time I got back to the front door from the car, not being able to bend over and tie my shoes, you know, things like that. And at one point too, man, get good friends, guys. I think it's so important to have great people around you, because one of the catalysts, I think, for me actually doing something was one of our good friends. So Daniel, you know, Daniel, you know, he's been one of my closest friends since college, and he had moved to Los Angeles at the time. I went to go visit him, and when I ended up getting there, he had pretty much gone vegan. And he's trying to kind of like push it on me a little bit. And I was like, dude, you're crazy. I'm from Texas. I need steak, you know? So, but at that point he looked at me and he just kind of said, hey man, like you need to lose some weight, bro. And I was like, what are you talking about, man? Like, I'm fat and happy, like get out of here. Like, I'm good. And he's like, no, man, seriously, like you're too young. Yeah, you need to lose some weight. And he's like, how about this? Just, you know, do this with me for a little while you're here, you know, eat what I eat. I'll cook for you and just come work out with me. And just try it out. And I was like, you know what? I've eaten meat at that point. I think I was like 26, 27. Excuse me. So I was like, you know what? I've eaten meat my whole life. Let's just give it a shot. And 2 weeks later, excuse me, my skin cleared up. I felt way more energetic. You know, I don't know if I really lost any weight or so. I probably did, but I wasn't really checking at the point. But really, it was the feeling of just how much different I
Yeah.
felt. My energy levels, just in
Two
general, how
weeks
everything
too.
felt
That's
good.
pretty fast.
Yeah, well, but you have to remember too that I was going from eating and drinking just terrible, like, you know, highly processed junk, pizza, things like that. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I ate entire pizzas to my face, like multiple times. And, you know, it went from, again, the diet was just really, really bad to all of a sudden eating practically vegan. And that was a huge shift. So yeah, I mean, very, very quickly, I started to see changes. My skin cleared up, you know what I mean? Just a lot of things started changing. And I was like, man, okay, that's the first time I think it set in that there's something to this stuff. You know what I mean? There's something to eating healthy and moving your body. And again, I wasn't whole sold on the whole vegan thing at the time. And I'm still not. I mean, I think it's a great thing for a lot of people, and eating plant-based is awesome. And I even suggest that to my clients, and I do to some extent practice it myself, but it was just really more the nutrition and the good stuff that I was eating. And anyway, so that whole time, that specific time period kind of like, again, made me realize, okay, there's something to this and things like that. But yeah, I can't really just point to like one single thing that just, you know, changed everything. It was just several, you know, moments where I just realized that what I was doing wasn't going to work out for the future if I wanted to live, basically.
Right,
Um,
right.
so yeah, I mean, and that's, I mean, I guess that kind of answered your question a little bit. I'm trying to think if there was anything.
How did that then kind of transition into Sleeping Giants Fitness and becoming a, successful business for yourself to be able to, live off of and grow?
Yeah, man. So I'm trying to think if there was any other catalyst that happened right around that time. So yeah, what ended up happening is, again, I ended up basically transforming, you know, my entire life within a year after I got serious about, you know, continuing to or continuing the path that kind of Dan helped me get on. And really for me, you know, the booze was just such a problem. And that's part of my journey. I mean, part of this was getting sober, and that was a huge help. So, you know, oftentimes you'll hear that the best way to replace a habit or get rid of a addiction or a bad habit is to substitute it with something that's going to be beneficial for you. And to some extent, I think, working out kind of took the place for me of alcohol. And yeah, I mean, it just completely put me into this new mindset where now I was able to, focus the time and energy into making myself better rather than having spent so long just destroying myself. And, if you ever talk to anybody kind of in addiction or early recovery, one of the things they'll tell you is they don't know what to do with themselves. They all of a sudden find themselves having so much time because they were just so used to like getting, blasted all the time, that now that they don't have that, they have no idea how to fill all that extra time up or even what to do. And I think that was like, again, the thing that I ended up focusing my energy on, which was great. And yeah, long story short, man, I mean, at that point, like I said, when I first decided, okay, I'm going to start focusing on myself and get sober, that was me had already lost, I think, some weight, by the time that came around. And then right around 2013 or 14, I said, okay, cool. I've, changed my life. Again, I went from being like pretty broke. I couldn't really find regular work. Finally got like a stable job, actually a pretty decent job in Silicon Valley doing tech. Had a decent place and had already kind of gotten somewhat in shape. And then I said, now it's time to take it to the next level. And at that point, I wanted to get in peak physical condition. So within that next year, it was just a complete shift. Now I was not just losing weight. Now I was really working on like getting shredded and, just improving myself overall. And during that time period, people kind of started asking me about like, hey, what are you doing? They started asking for help, and I wasn't exactly ready, but that kind of planted a seed as far as
Wow.
like,
So there was such a transformation that people were like, hey, what'd you do to like
yeah,
go
I
from,
mean,
how
that
much weight
people
was it? 70 pounds? Was it over
70
70?
pounds. Yeah, I ended up losing over
Wow.
70 pounds. So like people would notice. I mean, it was like a whole thing for me. I mean, I think mentally and even just the way I was carrying myself, people were like, oh man, you've changed. But obviously the physical thing was the biggest, like, whoa, what happened?
Yeah.
So right off the get, man, I mean, people kind of started asking me for help right away. And, that was kind of still while I was trying to figure things out. I mean, I had some trainers here and there that were kind of pointing the way, but for me, it was really just education. And I've always been stubborn and have, like I said, asking for help is like one of the hardest things for me to this day. I've gotten a lot better, but at that point I was still in that mindset of I'm going to do this. So I just, educated myself as best as I could, read a bunch of books, went on YouTube, obviously, like most people do, and watched everything I could. And then, yeah, I mean, long story short, again, to keep it short, that planted the seed for me realizing, hey, people need some help, and they would, I could potentially do that. And fast forward a few years, and I just started feeling this, like, I'm not gonna say I was feeling lost, but something like that, I was, again, by that time I had kind of, again, I went from being super, super broke, man. I think I was like $50,000 in the hole at one point, and had worked my way up in Silicon Valley, earning well over six figures at a high paying tech job. And I was great at my job and I liked what I was doing, but we had some like manager shifts and things were just kind of weird. And I just felt unfulfilled. And, I was really kind of trying to figure out what to do. And I just knew, like, I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing, but I don't think I'm supposed to be doing this. So
What does that feeling actually feel like? Like if you can hone it down, because I feel like a lot of people feel that like, but like it- it's still kind of amorphous. It's like unfulfilled. What does that feel like? You know what I mean? So if you could specify what that feeling really felt like and looked like to you.
yeah, that's really hard, but it just feels like your heart has a small hole that never really gets, it's just there. You understand it doesn't necessarily like hurt, but emotionally, I just remember just, again, it's like a feeling a little unfulfilled, feeling like I was missing something. It's kind of like the feeling that when you go to the grocery store and you're like, man, I feel like there's something I'm not getting that I forget to write down or whatever, but obviously amplified. But,
Right.
again, it's just really interesting, just um, emptiness in a way. And, or when you get lost, right? So you're driving somewhere, and I don't know if this has ever happened to you, but Sometimes I might even be somewhere somewhat familiar, and then all of a sudden you take like the wrong turn, and then you almost even just forget exactly where you are, and everything looks completely different.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like that, where I just didn't feel right. And at the same time, I think the feeling is also compounded with this calling, right? Like this shift, like you feel like you're getting pulled in another direction, and you don't know what's over there, but you know that if you continue going the path that you've been on so far, it's familiar and you know where it ends.
Mhm.
So you know what I mean? So not only is it like this need to get filled, it's also this attraction towards the unknown, towards another direction. And eventually for me, it got so strong that I was like, okay, I have to see what that is. You know what I mean?
Yep, for sure. For sure. Definitely know that.
So at that point, I literally quit my job. I started traveling the world, and then shortly after, I started Sleeping Giants Fitness. Um, and here we are.
No, that's sick. It's crazy because it's like big decision, big decision, big decision. Or I'll put that in quotations, but it's just very a decisive. It seems like it's a very decisive time period for you. Is that accurate to say, or
What do you mean by decisive time?
well, it's like quit my job, big
Oh
decision.
yeah.
I'm going to travel here, 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 and here. Big decisions. And then not only that, the adventures that you had along the way are kind of filled with these micro. A lot of courage had to be taken during those adventurous periods. And then furthermore, to come out and say, I'm going to do this company and start this, another big decision. A lot of courageous time,
You
at
know, it's
least from
funny,
my perspective.
man. Yeah, and it's funny because I've had other conversations with people, and they kind of talk about that, and it's like, man, that's like that takes courage. And I was like, really? Like, I didn't really see it that way. And even just thinking about it now, like it blows my mind, man, because I've always been very pragmatic, very stable, not one to take a lot of risks for the most part, kind of likes to plan things and ahead of time and all that kind of thing. And if you were to tell me, at that point or even a couple of years prior that I was going to do this and all within a very short period of time, I would have been like, you're crazy. Like, I wouldn't do that. It doesn't make any sense.
Right.
And like I said, if it wasn't for that just internal desire, calling, shift, and pull, then I don't think I would have been able to, and again, a lot of it was just more of intuitive kind of feeling. And, but yeah, I mean, it was a lot of activity. There was a lot of change in a very short period of time. And it blows my mind kind of looking back to think about it. But um, since then, though, I feel like it's continued. Like there's been a lot of changes, and whether that be personally or like what's happening with the world and things like that. Like since I left Silicon Valley, like it's just kind of been this constant thing. I even relocated to now I'm in Hawaii, obviously, and things like that. So um yeah, did I answer your question?
Yeah, kind of. I
Yeah.
don't know. I guess, yeah, there was just such a need to make the shift. And then I guess what's cool is to look back and and see that, oh, that, I guess you show up in life irrevocably different now. Like your resonance with life itself has shifted so that these things might not even, you'd be like, it's not courageous. I needed to do that almost, or there wasn't even maybe another option for you. Is that more accurate of how you felt?
I think so, man. You know what I mean? Because yeah, it's like when you hear people doing things like that, like I've always heard stories about people kind of, yeah, quitting the job, traveling the world, doing this and that. And like I said, I never thought that would be me. And but yeah, it was more like that, man. Like I didn't necessarily feel like I had a choice. Like
Right.
I felt like I just needed to do it. And again, I didn't know at the time when I quit that I was going to be starting this, but I had some idea that I needed to do something or wanted to do something on my own. And I just kind of knew if I didn't at least attempt that I wasn't going to like life down the road. I was going to stay where I was. I was going to get comfortable with the money that I was getting, again, nice cushy tech job and I could just see myself waking up 10 years from then, married with kids and working a similar job and just not being fulfilled. And that terrified me. I didn't want that. I wanted something more. And I've always felt that, man. Like, it's just, when I watched The Matrix, it just completely like resonated with me, because I've always kind of felt that way, like the way that Neo just kind of felt out of place, wanting more from life, not feeling like he belongs. And I never really felt that I was taking advantage of my full potential, that I was actually getting there. I've always felt a little different. And, now that I'm kind of doing this, I feel much more like I'm actually giving back to the world what I'm supposed to be giving back to the world. Like, I've actually shifted it a little bit more into my place, that need, that desire, that emptiness that I had felt isn't necessarily there anymore. But I think it always shifts. I think everyone kind of just has, quote unquote, a purpose in life, whether that be something that is created, by that person, or something that maybe potentially you can even call it fate. And honestly, I think it's probably one of the biggest reasons why people are not happy or uncomfortable with themselves, is just that lack of fulfilling that potential, especially as a male. I think as males and men, we're just really purpose and action driven. So to not have that is terrible. Really.
Yeah, empty. Yeah, right. Empty.
Yeah.
So why the decision to do fitness as opposed to something else to give back to other people?
Yeah.
For those
So
that don't know, I was gonna add something. For those that don't know, Adrian is an amazing guitar player. Like, it was unreal to watch him play and be in the room.
thanks, man.
Goes. And so
Thanks. Well, yeah, I mean, I'm actually glad you brought that up, because music, it's been a huge part of my life since I was a kid. I remember being like 3 years old and listening to, I had this little like white bear, and you would turn the back and it would play all of my favorite things. The song, I don't know who the original musician is, but I always think of John Coltrane's version. But this was like just a little belly version of it. And I remember listening to it and like being overcome with emotion, and almost, actually, I think I did tear up, and being like a little kid, like that's a trip.
yeah.
And it always had that impact on me. So yeah, I mean, music for the longest time I thought was my purpose and why I was here. And I thought I was going to do that for a living. And that's why even I got into tech. I mean, I went to Silicon Valley, I studied digital audio. And looking back now, I realized the only reason I did that was because I wanted an excuse to be able to create and play music. It wasn't necessarily because that's what I wanted to do for a job, as far as like the technical engineering side. I just simply wanted to play and create. And growing up, that's what I wanted to do. I mean, I wanted to be a rock star, basically. And I guess at some point, I ended up using the degree and got the audio gig doing tech. I was actually doing audiovisual stuff, like I said, bigger companies. And that was always a thought, like, how can I leverage what I do, or, use music as kind of a way to do it. But as I even did that as a career, and even worked at recording studios, or was like a session guitarist, I started to realize that I hold music to be so sacred that when I started to involve a monetary component of it, it like almost bastardized the art for me. And I remember specific moments where I was in situations where like having to play things I just didn't want to play, or just kind of like, again, sacrificing the art form just to make some money. And I did not like the way that felt. And I remember just thinking, what, if I can just use and have music be in a spot where I don't tie that into that aspect of my life, it would be a lot more freeing. And I was right. It was, and it still is. And I enjoy it a lot more when it's kind of just seen as this special thing. But that being said, so what happened? So I quit my job. I started traveling for a while, mainly, Central America and Europe. And right around that time, when I was getting towards the end of traveling, I was like, okay, now is probably a good spot to, I had some kind of money saved up. So, I wasn't going to like starve or anything like that. But I knew at some point I have to start looking to get in, more money so that I, can survive and everything. And I had started looking into, stock trading. And I actually did that for a little while. I was doing day trading and looked into crypto at the time and got really heavy into that. And at one point, I ended up meeting a woman who was going to start mentoring people on how to day trade, and she had a really awesome success story and went from not knowing anything to within 6 months just regularly making a ton of money. And I was in contact with her, and then at the same time, one of my mentors, Brandon Carter, who I pretty much got me into, well, he was one of the main like influencers on my fitness journey when I first started. When back then there wasn't as many YouTube people as there are now. And he was one of these guys I stumbled upon. And I was like, honestly, I was like, who is this jackass? He just came off as this
Yeah.
bro that was very uneducated and kind of like had this swag. And I was like, this dude, like, I mean, but he had an amazing physique. I mean, he was ripped to shreds. And I was like, wow. And I remember watching one of his videos and I was kind of confused because I was like, I don't know, like, is this guy for real? And then I've started watching enough videos to realize, holy crap, this guy knows what he's talking about. He is really smart. He just doesn't come off that way, and he kind of hides it in a way, but he
Right.
really knows what he's doing.
For
So
sure.
that guy all of a sudden started change. He changed his business, and he went from being more of a fitness coach and trainer to now starting to show other trainers how to run everything online.
Mhm.
And I was talking to the investor girl. I reached out to Brandon and literally sat down and made a pros and cons list and looked at on paper which one would be more beneficial. And it made more sense at that point to go with Brandon and try to do this fitness thing. So that's what I did. And I called him up. I got on a call, and I honestly didn't sign up right away. It took me a while. I had to end up calling him back later, and then I signed up. But the reason I ended up deciding more on the fitness was just because, like I said, it made more sense. It was something that had become a part of me. I mean, I don't. It's part of my lifestyle, And at that point, it's like, okay, I've done it for myself. Um, I really love this. I'm passionate about it, but it's not something to me like music where it's just like this, pristine little thing that I wanted to keep separate. I was okay with the idea of charging people and kind of making money that way, and even doing things for free, which I still do to this day. And yeah, man, I don't know. It just made sense, when I looked at who I am, what my skill set is, and what I'm into, and the whole thing, especially because it's an online business, like it just made more sense to me, and I decided that was the route to go.
Yeah, yeah. So why the name Sleeping Giants? I believe you told me the story when I was in Hawaii, but it's kind of a neat little tale.
Yeah, so cool. We actually have the time, so I'll give you the longer version. So 2012-ish, I was going through a really interesting time in my life. Uh, well, I should probably back up. When I was 20 years old, I had one of the ripples, one of the biggest ripples in my life. And I ended up having a massive panic attack. Okay. There's a lot involved with that. Like I said, I mean, addiction is part of my history. So at that point, I wasn't really drinking, but, weed was always something that was involved. And at that point, I was smoking a lot. I just got my wisdom teeth pulled, and I was taking whatever they gave me to kind of
Yeah,
help, but I was being very careful with it. I'm usually didn't really like taking prescription and all that kind of stuff. And but still, like a smart genius that I am, within a week I decided that it'd probably be okay to start smoking again, even though I still had stitches and like gaping holes in
oh,
my mouth.
right.
So started doing that again, and it was what it was. And then one day I ended up meeting up with a friend. We went to go drive around and smoke. And then I came back home. I sat down on my computer like I'm doing right now. I opened up a word processor and I saw the blinking, kind of cursor on the screen. And as I did that, it was like my mind decided to copy it. And all of a sudden, everything just went blank. Okay. The best way I can describe it, it's like if you just kind of came into the world for the first time, but in the body of your 20-year-old self, I just didn't know. I just completely disassociated, man. Like I had no idea where I was or who I was. It was just like I was in this room. I mean, I knew certain things. Like I think I figured out, yeah, I was home, quote unquote, and my like parents were there, but I just kind of didn't know what was going on and just felt super confused. And I started freaking out, and then my heart started racing, and I'm like, what the hell? This is crazy. And managed to call one of my best friends at the time. I'm like, hey man, like I'm tripping out right now. Like, can you please come pick me up? He ended up coming over. I bolted out the house, didn't even lock the doors or turn off any of the lights. And he ended up, picking me up, and we're driving around. And I'm like, dude, like, can you please like tell me about myself? Like I was trying to get any bit or piece of
Oh,
information about myself because I didn't know who I was, and I was trying to just grasp onto anything. And my buddy's like, at that point he was probably high himself, so he was just looking at me laughing, like tripping out, because he's like, dude, this guy, I don't think he ever understood, like, no, this was a major
yeah,
thing.
like,
And I ended up going to my other best friend's house, and I ended up staying the night there. And then the next morning, finally I was like back. Well, actually no, I wasn't back. It took me a whole year after that to come back to normal, man. But I at
whoa.
least calmed down. Like the episode at least went away, and I wasn't like, heart wasn't racing and freaking out. But
Did you
it
legit forget things? Like what?
dude,
Or did it come back at
I
all?
just,
Or like,
yeah. So no, I mean, after the episode passed, like I kind of remember, I remembered who I was and things like that. But still, it was just like this. It was like my ego just decided to like jump out of my body for a while.
yeah, it's
And
interesting.
it took
There's a
me a
term of
whole
that.
year. What is
Sorry,
it?
go ahead. Ego death. If you ever, I don't know if you've ever read like Union psychology books or anything like that. He talks about incidences like this. Um, it's
Yeah,
just an interesting thing.
I've read the term. I don't know. It's really hard to describe, man. Like they called it a panic attack. I don't know what it was, but I don't label it as that. I think I just freaked out. And like I said, there was a lot
Collapse
involved,
of
man.
your
I
entire
mean,
identity.
yeah, that's exactly what it was. But at the time, again, there was definitely, drugs involved, and there was just a lot of change happening in my life. Like, I think I had just broken up with one of my girlfriends that I dated for like 4 years. The band that I was in for a long time ended up breaking up. Like I was having to go from high school to college and like trying to figure out what to do in my life.
Wow.
And then to
Yeah.
throw another thing in the mix, that was really one of the points where I started getting really deep into spirituality, and started to kind of like explore that, and started to realize more of just like how powerful we can be as humans and our connection to God and like this whole other thing.
Yeah,
So
totally.
you're throwing all this like really life-changing, complex ideology with life situations and like marijuana and like and it just all hit me, I think, at that point, and I freaked out. And that was to this day, like, again, one of the things that just absolutely changed my entire life. And like I said, it took me a whole year before I felt normal again. Like after that, it was just this constant haze and feeling foggy, not really knowing what to do with myself. Like I remember at certain points I'd be out or at school and college at the time, and like looking at people and thinking like, what do normal people do? Like, what do people do with their times? Like, how do you even live life? Like this is everything became very strange to me.
Yeah.
And I just, again, it was just like depression,
I've
anxiety,
had that
everything was really
before.
hard.
Yeah. Yeah. You were
Yeah,
literally wondering
man.
how people are living. Yeah.
Yeah,
I forgot
it's
how to
it's a
speak
trip.
one time.
You had a
So
what?
I forgot how to speak one time. Like I couldn't, like, I didn't know the words I was using. And it's like it's a weird thing that can happen psychologically where like something like and then like your normal function can't operate. So it's a trip.
Yeah, yeah, it's a trip. So later on, separate episode, I remember at one point I was with Nate with and another producer at a studio, and I felt like that was going to start to like another panic attack was kind of coming on. But I remember
About what
at
year
that
is
point,
this? Like
this was much
what
later. So this
okay.
was this was like, again, yeah, 2012ish, more or less. So the when I had the first episode, I was that was like in 2016 or something like that. So this was like years later. No,
Okay.
hold on, that's not right.
Yeah, I was like,
This was
that
like,
went in forward in time.
yeah,
We
no,
do.
that was in 2006 when I had the big panic attack. So
Gotcha.
this episode I'm talking about later, when I was with Nate, basically what happened is I was chilling with them and I could see him and his other producer friend talking. And though I could hear the words coming out of their mouth, I didn't know what they were saying. It just didn't make any sense. Like, so it was kind of like I didn't forget how to speak, but I couldn't
Wasn't processed.
understand. Yeah, I couldn't process, like, and at one point they just became sounds. They weren't even like words. Like I didn't understand what's going on. But anyways, so yeah, that was that massive, kind of shift in my life. Took me a whole year before I ended up coming back down to earth. And in that year, I ended up moving from El Paso, Texas to the Bay Area with girlfriend at the time. And things still kind of got a little trippy. Like I said, I've always been a very active dreamer, and I always kind of was attracted by the psychedelic and just like all the deep philosophical theologies. And one of my favorite bands is Tool, and like I don't know if you know much about Tool, but they get really deep into sacred geometry and all these other kind of things. And I ended up having several dreams that kind of stuck out to me. And again, fast forward years later, this was probably around 2012, right before I ended up kind of making the whole big life change. And again, mind you, that though I wasn't having, like, that was a major panic attack. Several times throughout those years, I had glimpses of almost falling into the same thing, but it never really fully hit. And again, at that point I probably should realize, like, hey man, like you might not want to be like smoking and drinking and you're having these issues, and was really stubborn and never really sought help, and things just got worse and worse and worse. But I remember specifically one night before I went into the studio, I had this really powerful dream, and this probably won't make a whole ton of sense to you, but I'll try to tell it as best as I can. In the dream, I kind of just came to, and I'm like at a warehouse with a bunch of my family members, and we have to go to the door, and there's this kind of person in the front, security, and he's asking us like, what's the password? And I tell him the password, and then he's like, okay, as soon as I open the door, you guys have to absolutely go in as fast as possible. So we go in, and my grandpa's like straggling. So I go and get grandpa. I'm like, dude, come on, we got to go. We enter this warehouse, and as we get there, it becomes apparent there's apparently like some wedding happening, like the ceremony. And I don't know who these people were, but I remember there being like this, it's called a huppah, I believe, in the Jewish culture. And it's where people stand under to get married, which has some significance to me because my old stepfather, his family was Jewish, and I had an experience with being under the huppah with his parents at one point and having a really odd sensation of just this flow of like love that passed through everyone that was underneath that thing, and that was one of the first times too where I remember feeling like, I don't know if you want to call it the Holy Spirit or the presence of like God or whatever, but it was just this energy, and it was different. So that was in the dream, and I remember seeing that, and they were moving the wedding into another location, so they took everyone over, and as we go through this door, we end up in this high school gym. It was like my high school gym, but it was just massive. And as we walk in there, at the bottom where I guess the basketball court would be, because it was a huge stadium, they started to set up. So I was walking in there, and all of a sudden I started noticing all these like crazy dogs running around, and started to feel a little like, okay, this isn't supposed to be there. Like something's happening that's not supposed to be happening. And I get up and I start walking towards the bathroom, and I run into this pastor that I had met in real life months before. And again, there's all this is like layered and probably has some deeper connection, but for brevity's sake, I'll just say he ended up, when we met him, he ended up having a huge impact on one of my friends' lives. Like he ended up helping her with a bunch of stuff. And so I saw this guy, and he's like, Adrian, it's time. And I'm like, what do you mean, pastor? And he's all, it's time, Adrian. I'm like, okay, time for what? And he said, it's time for you to awaken the sleeping giants. And I'm like, what? And he said, and he repeated himself, it's time, Adrian. It's time for you to awaken the sleeping giants. And I'm like, this guy's tripping, right? I was like, Pastor's gone crazy. I'm like, okay, Pastor, whatever. So after I talked to Pastor, I end up going to a bathroom that's in the back of this huge gym, and it's in the shape of this really nice like Indian palace, and it's all like white ivory, and it didn't really fit in the gym, but I knew that it was a bathroom, so I went there. And as I walked into the bathroom, I noticed that there was like a crack on the side of the wall, and I thought it was weird, so I went and I kind of just ran my finger through it, and as soon as I touched it, it started crumbling, and all of a sudden the entire bathroom started to come apart, and pieces started falling all over the place, and I ended up backing up, and as everything's falling, I see that they're becoming like these little liquid pools of silver, and they start to morph and transform into a figure. And I'm like, what the heck? So I'm like freaking out, and I go to the back, and I all of a sudden start to see that the whole palace is forming two giants, and they're made of like this liquid silver material, but at the same time, as they're starting to take shape, they have like really robotic, almost transformer like features. And then all of a sudden they start to like make noises, and they start to destroy things that are around them. So at that point, I'm like running and trying to get away from them. And as I get into the hallway, obviously I have one of these scenes where I'm like going in slow motion and running as fast as I can, but everything's super slow. And then I get outside, and I look back and I see them starting to wreak havoc, and then I wake up. Okay. So that was a dream. And again, like this is what, how many years later? Almost 10, more than 10 years later, and I still remember pretty much all
Yeah,
the
super lucid.
yeah, and this isn't uncommon for me. Like I've always been a really lucid dreamer. I've actually had actual lucid dreams before, and several times I've had dreams that will come true. They're not always maybe exactly the same, but
Wow,
I'll
interesting.
dream out a scenario where like something happens, like I meet somebody, and then in real life it'll kind of happen
Happens
almost
that way.
very, very similar.
Interesting.
So
That's so wild.
yeah, so that was the dream, and it was obviously so impactful that I've had to do something with it. So it ended up becoming an album that I started working on with one of my close friends. And that was it, right? So I didn't really think much of it. I never really quite understood what it meant. I mean, I was able to break things down here and there because, like I said, there's so much symbology that is really personal to my life, right? Like the hoopah and things like that. And I actually showed it to a few people, and even like when I was going to church at the time, I showed it to somebody, and he apparently that was one of his giftings, was to like interpret dreams. So he gave me a lot of information with that, and um, yeah, I was always really fascinated by it. And
You ever see the pastor again and tell him about it?
no, I never saw him again. He ended up once I left the Bay Area. Yeah, and I never got to tell him about that. But the interesting thing, and the reason I called it Sleeping Giants, was because when I was trying to decide on a name for the company, that was one of the main things that came to mind. And then at that point, I made the realization that the two giants that I awoke, right, were actually the men and women that I was supposed to be helping. Right. So that's kind of what clicked. It's like, oh, that's what that was.
Right.
And it made sense. And I'm sure, like I said, I think that it's one of those dreams where I'll probably be unpacking for the rest of my life because there's so much in it. But at that
Right.
point, that's what it made sense. And even late, much later, I think I have the book right next to me. Tony Robbins has a book called Awaken the Giant Within.
Yeah.
Fantastic book. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. Really, really powerful. And I never made that connection. I didn't even think about that book when I was, coming up with all this stuff. But years later, I ended up reading it. And when I looked at the title, I was like, wow, I didn't even know. But, again, I really, again, it wasn't kind of a allegory. So I believe, and I was this person. So, all of us have just so much potential and immense power and ability within us that we can literally all accomplish and do whatever it is that we want to do. And most of us are just asleep, honestly. And, I the bigger picture for Sleeping Giants, maybe years down the road, isn't only just to help people get in shape, but it's truly to help them transform their overall lives, right? Mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually. And, that was what happened to me. And then that's what I desire for people, is to improve. I was always stuck for the longest time. I had a terrible mindset, and being able to see what I've been able to do, just inspires me, not just for myself and my future, but even in other people, and I always try to look at the best in people and see, their true core and potential, and kind of try to bring that out in them, because I think the world is naturally trying to do the opposite. You know what I mean? Like, since we're small, people are telling you, no, you can't do that. You're too dumb. You're not fast enough. You're too short. You're whatever. And it's these conditions that, and limits that we place on our own selves. So really my goal, and the whole goal of Sleeping Giants Fitness, is to awaken the true giant that's within you, to allow you to do that in however fashion that you want to do. And for me, again, the physical part was obviously a big part, but for me now, that's just a catalyst. It's just a catalyst to get to the true core and the true light that's within you. And that's why I decided to call it Sleeping Giants Fitness.
Oh, crazy. It's a cool story.
Thanks,
Yeah,
man.
that dream, just like you described it really well. It felt like in a movie. You could see the scenes and everything. So it's crazy how, yeah, like how do you unpack that? Because it literally had a huge effect on your life and how you're operating now, and like it's physical and tangible, and you're like, well, this money that I'm experiencing is coming from this dream, or like so many things are connected to it. It's like it's just a lot to process. A lot to process indeed.
Definitely, man. And like I said, it's I think my dreams have always kind of been like that. I don't even know why. I'm like thinking back why I even told you about the panic attack, but I think it was crucial, because when I had that panic attack, because growing up, man, I mean, I did great. Like, I was always never really had any issues. I mean, I did really well in school, was pretty confident, besides kind of battling with my weight here and there. I had a really solid, like, first 18 years of my life. And then all of a sudden, like, from, I don't know, 18 to 28, it was just like bad. It's just a lot of struggle, a lot of pain. And but at the same token, man, I'm grateful for it, because having to go through all that made me who I am now. It created that foundation. It gave me strength. And I'm one of those guys that, unfortunately, I have to learn the hard way sometimes. And not having gone through that would have never given me the toughness that I needed to be able to kind of be where I am now. And to some extent, sometimes I'll tell people, it's like, hey, I actually want you to struggle. And because
Totally.
that's how you grow. You know what I mean? Like, if you just stay comfortable and do what you got to do, and it's going to be the same kind of thing. And for me too, I think the biggest thing and lesson through all that also was just kind of getting help. And that was huge for me. I think I stayed stuck for the longest time just because of pride and ego, and thinking that I could manage this myself, and not knowing how to deal with emotions in a healthy fashion, and hence turning to, like, drugs and alcohol, whatever. And it just really brought it to my attention, like, how valuable and important life is and was, and where my priorities lied, and what I wanted to accomplish, and how that involved other people too, right? So yeah, man, it's been quite a journey. But again, I'm grateful for it.
I wanted to touch on the help thing. What specifically have you found that helped you gain the skill, I guess, of asking for help? Like, what really started to break that down and pick that piece? You're like, you know what? I got to get better at asking for help. How did you like start?
Jeez, man. I mean, honestly, it was like not having any other option, right? At that point, I just knew, like, I had tried to quit drinking on my own. I think I had two stints where maybe I got 30 days, and then at that 30-day mark, I was like, oh, I'm good. Like I was able to do this, and then I'm going to celebrate now. And then I'd go and start drinking again, and then just got right back on and got stuck.
Uh,
And yeah, I mean, I think that feeling of desperation, just of because again, it's touching on the alcohol addiction is such a bitch, man. I mean, for lack of a better word, it's really, really difficult place to be, because I'm a very logical person, overthinker, overanalyzer by nature. And when you throw like something like addiction into the mix, that doesn't even matter. Like, and I remember my grandmother always mentioned, like, I don't understand, like, why are you having this problem? But like, you're so smart. And I'm like, Grams, like, men much smarter than me at genius level have dealt with the same thing. You know what I mean? Like, addiction
yeah,
it doesn't discriminate. It has nothing to
right.
do with how smart you are. There's they call addiction a disease of the soul. And
Mm,
when I heard it phrased that way, I was like, that makes total sense, because
yeah,
in my mind, it's like, I'm never drinking again. And then 5 o'clock comes around and I have a beer in my hand. It's like, well, how did this even happen? It's like happened without thinking. And as I'm doing all of this fitness stuff, and this is really what I'm working on now in the next phase of, the company, is it all comes down to habits and habit formation. And it goes to the point where everything operates at a subconscious level.
yep.
And, it's people, we're living in the information age, or probably moving beyond that now. And if we're not already there, and we don't have a knowledge issue. Like, you ask most people, how do you lose weight? And they're going to be like, eat less and work out. Right.
Yeah,
What we have is an execution problem. People struggle to take action, to become action takers and remain consistent and execute. That's the issue. And all that kind of goes back and lies in the habits, and setting yourself up for success um, in that realm. And when I started seeing, hey, I'm doing this and still getting the same results, I can't stop. Then I realized, okay, I surrender. I surrender. Like, I need to. What I'm doing isn't working. I need to do something else. So at that point, I just started being more open. I started telling more people about what I was experiencing, and as I shared my struggles, I listened to suggestions, and I just decided, I'm done with this. I'm done of just being miserable. There's so many areas of my life that need to be changed, that I'm going to do whatever. And that's what did it for me at the time. Just it was out of necessity. and
right.
and now, again, man, I think it's just continuously remembering, for me, like, where I was and who I want to become, and on purpose asking for help even when I don't think that I need it. You know what I mean? So
Yeah, a little bit. Do you have an example?
yeah, I mean, it could be something as simple as like I needed, my website worked on, right? So I used to do web development back in the day. I'm more than capable of creating a website, but I realized that I hadn't done it to that point, and the chances of me actually getting myself to do it were probably gonna be pretty low. So it just made more sense to ask somebody for help to do that for me. You know what I mean? And
Hmm.
so yeah, so that's what I did, even though, like I said, something I could have done. So I said, here's an opportunity for me to exercise the asking for help muscle, right? Either I could sit there and try to do this myself, or I could say, hey, let me get somebody else to do it, even though I know what I'm doing. So something as simple as that, man, and you just kind of have to practice that. It can be in small areas of your life. And typically, if you do them for smaller things, such as the example I just gave you, then when it comes down to something a lot bigger, um, then it becomes a little bit easier. But it also, I think, just requires you getting down to a level of honesty with yourself, and also being open, especially to those around you and who you're kind of seeking out. Because if you're not necessarily sharing that information or you're remaining closed off, then those opportunities for help kind of aren't there, or they tend to disappear a little bit more, because you're not necessarily in that flow of things. You know what I mean? That makes sense.
Yeah, that energy exchange. There's no space for the help to come in. Something like that.
Yeah, exactly. That's pretty much it.
Okay. So we'll try and do a pivot here. I'm just reading some questions I have. Want
Yeah,
to kind of
man.
get into a little bit more of a nitty gritty around fitness itself, if you don't mind, if you can
Yeah.
kind of help us. I have one here. Like, what is the one fitness myth that you wish you could kill off and destroy for people and just like set right if you could?
Man, I actually probably have a list of this somewhere. Excuse the wailing dog if you hear that. Um, Poor guy.
Literally
Such
wailing.
a cute dog, but not the smartest. Gosh, man, honestly, it's one of those questions where like I deal with it so much that I can't even think at this time.
I guess I
Myths.
would ask, what are you noticing now in your clients, just maybe fitness in general, walking the
Yeah.
streets, whatever you're seeing, like, all right, this is kind of where your focus is on now and trying to
Yeah, that might be a better way to go. You know what, man? It's like I said, I was touching on this earlier. Um, the issue is in, how do I even put this into mind? Like I said, people know what they need to do. It's really just going about how do I execute this? And it's always remarkable to me. The most fascinating part about working with others and doing all this is the human mind and how people follow through or don't follow through, right? Because most of the time when I'm talking to somebody, we've probably had some interactions or conversations, or they might have been seeing my content for a while. And by the time we talk on a phone or on a video call, they've already have kind of decided I'm going to expend enough energy to like even just, get on that call, right? They had a message me or actions were taken to be able to get to that point. And even when I talk to them and I kind of explain what it is that I do, how I can help them, several times I'm kind of asking like, hey, are you sure you want to do this? Like, what are your motivations? Like, what's the real reason why you want to do this? And that's kind of it, man. And going back to even my journey and, all this fitness stuff, people struggle to change, because it's usually not until the pain of change surpasses the pain of staying the same that anyone has a true ability to kind of make any progress. Because if it doesn't, then it's really easy, like I said, to stay comfortable and stay where you are. So it's amazing to me. And like I said, I go pretty deep when I'm talking to people to make sure that those things are at least set in place, because, talking to Billy Joe or whatever, and he's like, man, I'm ready. Let's do this. Like, I'm tired of being fat. I'm unhealthy. Like, doctor tells me to lose like 20, 30 pounds. I just don't want this life anymore. Like, I'm super stoked. Let's get it. I'm ready to work. And Billy Joe might say that, and come 3 weeks in, all of a sudden, Billy Joe stops hitting some of his workouts. He's like not eating what he's supposed to be eating. And he kind of just starts doing his thing. And I'm like, Billy Joe, like, what's good, man? Like, you told me that you were ready, that you were tired of this. And here you are, and you're not lining up with your actions, So like, what's going on there?
yeah,
Right.
right.
And like I said, that's where this is more now a psychological thing, where it's like, why can't you execute? Like, where are all these excuses coming from? Or you're trying to reason yourself out of doing things for a certain reason, or you just don't care, or it's just not a priority. And that's pretty much what it comes down to too, is, prioritizing things. Like, if, I always tell people, it's like, you have a business meeting tomorrow at 3 p.m. and your manager says, hey, Sean, I need you to get on this meeting. Like, it's super important. Your ass is going to be at that meeting. You know what I mean? Like, no matter what happens, like, you're going to be there. Yet if you have a workout you're supposed to hit at 5 o'clock, and you're feeling a little tired that day, all of a sudden you're not going to be at that workout, right? So that's kind of one of the things I'm always telling people. It's like, you have to treat this stuff. For me personally, that's one of the things that really helped me. I said, no matter what I do this day, I am going to hit my workout and I'm going to eat what I'm supposed to be eating, no matter what. Like I could fail at other things
Everything
that
else.
day.
Yeah.
Yeah. But as long as those two things are done, then I have accomplished, that check mark for the day or whatever. And I
Right.
had to do that every freaking day until it got down to the level of being a habit, right? And then once you get down to that level of it being habitual, then you don't really have to work as hard anymore. You don't have to rely off of willpower or discipline because it's ingrained in you. I mean, just think about it. Like, how motivated are you to brush your teeth every day? Like, you're not, right? It's you just do it because you've been doing it since you were like freaking 3 years old or 2 years old or whatever. And it's the same kind of thing with the fitness stuff. I mean, obviously there's a little bit more effort involved, but that's kind of the trick, and that's kind of the way to go about doing these things. But at first, it's not going to be like that, and you're going to have to work hard. It's going to kind of suck in some aspects, but it doesn't have to be extremely difficult. And kind of back to answer your question initially, like I don't think it's a myth, man, but the biggest problem with all these things is that people simply don't want to put in the work, and they want super fast and instant results. And that is a terrible mindset and way to approach this thing, because you're going to end up just shooting yourself in the foot. And I think that was one of the biggest things that helped me, is that when I was watching Brandon Carter's videos, at some point I remember he said, give yourself an entire year, give yourself a year to kind of get your transformation or the results that you want. And I latched on to that and I said, okay, cool, I'm going to give myself an entire year. So hence, 3 months pass and I'm like frustrated because I'm working my ass off and, eating super amazing things and working out in the gym several times a week. And I'm not seeing any changes, and I'm just like frustrated beyond all belief. But then it's like, okay, wait a second, man, that's right. You said an entire year, like, let's reassess. If this isn't working, then what needs to change, and things like that. But most people just don't simply have the patience for it. And that's probably part of what I help people with the most, is kind of just reminding them. It's like, hey, like this takes time. It took you 20 years to gain the 30 pounds. You're not going to lose it in 20 days. Right. And at the same token, pointing out other forms of progress, because it's really easy to get caught up on metrics and numbers. And I want to see the freaking scale go down 20 pounds. And then when it doesn't do that, you judge your entire journey based of your ability to get those results or not. But you're kind of like pushing to the side all the other benefits that came along that path, which could be maybe you didn't lose any weight, but maybe your waist got smaller. Maybe you lost 4 inches off your waist. And the reason you're not losing weight is because you're actually putting on a little bit of muscle mass. Maybe you were getting stronger in the gym. Like maybe you added 30 pounds to your bench press. Maybe your clothes are fitting better. Maybe your sleep is better. Maybe your energy is improving. Like all sorts of other metrics or things that you can use to see improvement and progress. But you're over here disappointed just because the freaking scale didn't go down the number that you wanted it to go down, where in comparison, it doesn't even really matter because you've gained so many other things, right? So I think that's kind of part of it. I mean, like I said, it's just having clear expectations and understanding of what it is that you want, but not being disappointed when you don't hit like very specific goals, and not acknowledging all the other benefits that came is really a bad place to be. For me, like the losing the weight was awesome, but it was kind of a side effect. Like I really try to focus in on bettering myself and my lifestyle. And you hear it all the time in the fitness industry. People are like, create the lifestyle. If you create the lifestyle and develop that, like that's what's going to get you the results. But when it comes down to it, man, it's mindset. Like that's probably key. Like if you can get your mind right, I mean, with anything in life, right? Like once that mindset's in place, then everything else is just, following the plan and executing.
Yeah, just executing on it. So as a coach, how have you developed the skills to be able to help these people execute? Essentially, that was a much simpler question than I
I mean, I'm not gonna lie, man. It's hard. It's not easy, and you have to meet everyone where they're at. And for some people, they can be having a problem or a struggle, and I can say a sentence, and that's enough for them to be able to get a little bit of motivation or whatever to be able to push forward. And the hard reality is, and I hate to say it, man, but I can't help anybody. I've worked with people that it was kind of a waste of time, and it's simply just because mentally they weren't in the right mind space to be able to do what they were supposed to do. And like I said, I try really hard to kind of get to the root of all these things. And before we even work together, I try to be very clear, like, hey, like, are you ready to do this? You know what I mean? Like, this isn't something you
Right.
just decide you're going to try. Like, this is a
What are
commitment.
the motivations? Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, man, it's tough. But again, I guess from a more practical standpoint, like I said, I just really try to understand the person, to see where they're at, to provide the right incentive or motivation to help them when they're struggling, to remind them of their why and why they're doing this. And again, to point out, the improvements that they're making when they don't see them themselves, or when they're judging themselves based off of 5 pounds, when they're not realizing they like can deadlift 50 more pounds, like things like that, right? Is always kind of just helping change the direction of where they're looking, right? Because naturally people get frustrated and they want to kind of look towards all the negative side of things. So I'm really just trying to shift that perspective and find ways to encourage
Right.
people.
Kind of put their head back on track, kind of thing. Gotcha,
Yeah.
as they're winning the race. Hmm. Now, is there anything like specific, tangible in your growth as a coach from when you started to now? You're like, oh, okay, this shift when I'm talking to clients or this specific thing has just made that process way more effective and quicker and saved you time, or just helping them align their vision more and getting them back on track.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, as I've been kind of touching on, it's just setting clear expectations, but also providing, and this is part of what I'm developing now, are more actionable items to set up those habits, right? So like I gave you the example earlier, right? Is one of the things I tell, now I'm trying to make this a requirement with everyone I work with, but it's more of a suggestion at this point where I'm like, okay, pick out your workout time. Ideally, you're going to want to pick the time that you can stick to consistently, regardless of what's happening with your schedule. So say, for example, you work 2 jobs, your first shift is like 8 to 12, and then you go in again at 3 to like 8. Okay. And this happens Monday through Friday. So I would suggest at that point, okay, let's pick 1 p.m. because no matter what job or what's going on, you're sure that you're free at 1 p.m. Monday through Sunday, right? So that's going to help with the queuing, with the kind of habit aspect of things. And I'm like, okay, at 1 p.m. now you're going to schedule this on your calendar. You're going to have a reminder, and you're going to treat this like an important business meeting, and you're not going to miss it no matter freaking what. Right.
Right.
Things like that. And even with, just, okay, same thing with like meal prepping, right? Okay, Sundays at 8 o'clock, we're going to meal prep, and we're going to make sure that we get all this in for the week, because you're planning for your success. So having that food made and available to you is going to increase the chances by a lot that when you're hungry or running around between work or meetings or whatever, you're going to go and just grab that pre-made meal that you've already planned for, rather than doing the easy thing and grabbing crap or cookies or high calorie food or going out to eat fast food. You know what I mean? But it's a lot different when I tell people, hey, pick the time you want to work out and pick a day to meal prep, rather than being a little bit more like meticulous with the, let's pick a time, let's put it on your calendar, let's do this, right? And that's kind of really what I'm working on, and I've seen that has helped people, is kind of this, like, I don't know what you want to call it, like the pre-habit formation or the pre-planning for the actual work that you're going to do. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And again, I haven't come up with like an ironclad system just quite yet, but that's really what I'm working on, is before that person even goes and does their first scheduled workout for their program, they've already have at least done some preparation so that they can stick with it and become consistent.
Right. You're kind of going back layers before the actual thing that you're doing. You're getting to another point that leads to that habit, that leads to that habit,
Yeah,
that
yeah.
leads. It's all kind of the
Yeah, because
connecting
if
elements.
you just tell people, okay, here are your workouts and here's what to eat, like they can do that so many different ways, right? They can decide,
Yeah.
okay, I want to train Monday at 8 and then like Wednesday at 5. And when you have so
Wake up
many
at
changing, yeah,
middle of the night.
exactly.
Yeah, right. It's like just
That's probably one of the biggest tools or tips that I can like give people is take out all these variables. You know what I mean? The more variables you have and the more constant things are changing, it's going to make it a lot harder for you to establish that continuous foundation, because everything's, all over the place.
moving, right.
So,
And I'd say
those
that doesn't
those
even just go mentally. I'd assume that your physical body is actually affected by all that incongruence. And when you can hone it
yeah,
in, streamline it, probably
right. Yeah, I mean,
works.
I don't have any science on this, but I can tell you with in my personal experience, like, I've kept my workouts pretty consistent. Usually it's between like 9:30 and 10:30 in the morning. My body kind of naturally will like start feeling like, hey, it's time to work out. Like I just have this physical sensation where it kind of starts almost getting ready because it knows that these are the times I usually work out. You know what I
Time
mean?
to, yeah.
So yeah, it makes a huge difference.
So would you say that breaking down the meticulousness of those habit formations, is that kind of like the white space that you see in your industry that you're like, yo, other coaches aren't doing this shit. They're not going to this length. They're not going to this depth. I'm going to take this white space because this is where some difference is being made.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly it, man. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I have colleagues that do what I do and we're always in communication, and none of them really do that. I mean, I've seen like one ad for this one guy who he changed, that was his thing. He changed from being a personal trainer to being a like behavioral coach, right? So that's really what I'm exploring, and that's really what I want to kind of focus on, because like I said, you can get a workout plan and even a meal plan in a lot of different places, but what I want to be the magic bullet for people is being consistent with those things, because even if you have the optimal like program and your diet is completely on point, like if you can't make those again habitual, something you can maintain and be consistent with, then it's not going to matter. You're better off running a half-assed plan that you can do for longer than trying to do the perfect one that you can maintain for a couple of weeks.
Yeah, right. Wow. Okay. I know we're kind of coming up here on your time. I'm trying to think if there's any other. There is a good question that I do want to ask. It's actually part of my process of making sure I ask this to everyone who comes on the podcast. And
Yeah.
I guess we'll finish with this question. And the question is what is, in one word, your deepest value and why?
Deepest value like in life?
Yeah. Or whatever comes to you. It's a little open-ended, but your deepest value for living life, yeah. Like the most meaningful. It's right down to the depths of Adrian's soul.
Wow, one word. I mean, initially when you asked that, and like I said, I don't know, it might be a little cliche and
Hey, it's
typical,
exploration. It's
but
no right answer to it.
so the first word that came to mind is love, obviously, and I think it's just so cliche, but when I think of it as love, I also thought of like resonance and um especially lately, man, it's just my whole journey and everything. It talked about my story, man. Like it all came down to that intuitive core, right? And I think everyone has that to some extent. It's probably one of the most important things that we can all explore and get to know is, that internal feeling that your soul, your essence beyond the layers of who you think you are or others perceive you to be. And I think it's extremely important to live authentically and to live from that place and to be in tune with that portion of who you are, because it'll help you become more in tune with those around you and even to the entire world. And, we're all connected. We're all part of this big, beautiful family on earth. And I think there's a lot of people, unfortunately, probably most people don't operate from place from that depth. And when you can operate from that place, it's such a sacred and delicate part of you that I think just naturally that resonance flows into love. And, if you can do anything and everything with love, it'll change your entire existence, and I think my journey and my struggles were always because of the lack of love that I even had for myself, and trying to fill that void with all sorts of things. And yeah, man, I mean, for whatever reason right now, that's what's coming to mind, is just, living in that state of flow, of authenticity, of who you really are, and not being afraid to take risks and be that person 100%, and not necessarily caring about what other people think of you, or even to some extent, like what's going to happen if you live from that aspect, because I think that part of you is going to guide you and take you to be and fulfill your fate, your destiny, your overall life. And yeah, I don't know if that made any sense, but that's what I was feeling at the time.
No, that's, you said it all pretty well. I agree with that. Yeah, I can easily identify the aspects where that applies to my own life now. And it's like, okay, yep, where am I not as authentic as I might want to be? Where am I not feeling that resonance? Because if you're tuning into your life experience, I think you can identify where, ooh, okay, I was asleep. Going back to your sleep, and you can start picking apart where you might be asleep and trying to like wake up from that.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
And like I said, it's depending. I don't know. Everyone has a different view on life and beliefs and stuff like that. But um, getting to where I am now, and the best decisions and things that I've made in my life have always been from making those decisions, and getting to know like what that resonance is, you know what I mean? And again, I think intuition is just such a beautiful thing. One of those things that I ask, for daily, because usually that doesn't steer me wrong,
Yeah.
and
Even that's such a wild thing. It's like, how is it not wrong? You spend so much time second guessing it, and then you follow it, and it's right like every time, and you're like, what the hell? Why is this even like a struggle then if it's just going to be right every time?
yeah. I mean, and sometimes it's not, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's because your intuition was wrong. You might just not have read it the right way, and
Yeah, right.
or things, or you could have been spot on, but the intuition is leading you towards a different result because you have a different lesson to learn, right? And that's kind of the most important thing that I've learned over the years, is mistakes are a good thing, because you end up learning from them. And in a sense, there's no such thing as mistakes, because if you're learning something from it, then you didn't really make the mistake, you just learned a lesson.
Totally. It's a
And
victory
it's
for sure.
it's a constant challenge and battle for me too, is not being afraid to go out and try things and do things. And with everything comes some form of risk, but sometimes those risks outweigh the rewards. Most of the time they do. And it ties back into that whole thing, is as long as you're being authentic and living from that place, usually everything works out as it's supposed to,
Yeah, there's like no regret to it for sure. Man, thank you so much, Adrian, for coming on the podcast. Where can people find you? Where can they get your fitness advice, your fitness training? Where can they get
Yeah,
more
man.
Adrian?
So sleepinggiantsfitness.com is my website. I would also, I'm on Instagram, Sleeping Giants Fitness, TikTok, and those are probably the two places that I would start. I post pretty regular, fitness advice on all those kinds of things. But yeah, that's the main place you can find me.
Sweet deal. Is there anything else that you'd want to tell people or anything?
I think I'm good, man. I just want to thank you for having me on, and I appreciate you. And I had a great talk, and would love to do this again whenever you want. And for everyone else listening, thanks for tuning in. I appreciate you. I wish you nothing but the best in all areas of your life.
Thank you, Adrian. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. And have a good rest of your day. And wish the best for you, man. We'll definitely do this again. It's a pleasure talking with you.
Thanks, man. You too. Have a good one, man. We'll chat soon.